Let's see that. Now try to get everyone on board. I'm sorry I had a little difficulty with this streaming. This is the first time I'm doing it. Let's just adjust the video here. Hello. And let's go for it. So right now I just enter some details here on the ongoing live stream. Just made a new link. It's streaming from my phone. Let me access it and post it here. Find out if it's really okay. So let's just go to my videos and preload. Where it doesn't show my live stream. Now it does show. Bingo! Details. Copy the link. And let's click on it to see. Awesome! Thank you. Hi, Klaus. So good to see you. I mean, to see the chat. Let me see, because I'm not seeing my stream yet. So let's click on it. Nothing's happening on my end. And I think I'm seeing, oh, now I'm seeing myself as well. Indeed, picture is nice. I think I'm seeing, oh, now I'm seeing myself. And there's a refreshing delay between what I'm saying and what appears on the screen. So here we go. Let's go back to the old link and post it there, the new link. Okay. So let me read the comments. Oh, so there's Nick, there's Klaus, Mikael from Oslo, Norway. Wow, fantastic. So thank you for joining me for this live stream. And awesome. Hi, Laura. And I think today is more about an introduction and just telling you about a little bit about my backstory, about when you listen to this channel, what are you getting. Plus, most importantly, I don't want to hijack this whole live stream for that purpose, because during my videos I have already said many of the things about myself, how I got to be exposed to audio, why I'm getting so deep into it, and really I want to make these live occasions for you, so that if you want to ask something, then you can ask about it. And also I want to add that all my videos that I make, I kind of like a little bit like a nice yeah, the long hair, right? It's funny. What I just got hijacked here, my train of thought. So when I do my videos, they are kind of like non-live live events, because I do not edit and cut my videos. So I just put my phone on record and record it. That's it. There's no editing, no filtering, nothing. You are getting basically answers that you would get if you were to ask me. But what I get more when I do a video for my own, I can think about the answers and come up with things, like have some time for thought. And right now you are just getting everything without too much thinking about it, so on the spot. So sometimes I'm looking away because I'm looking at my computer screen, and that's where the streaming happens, and that's where I see the chat. So I don't see the chats when I'm looking at the camera. Um, so it seems that everyone has is hearing me, is seeing me, and it's quite amazing, because now this live stream is just spans from day to night. Just like you are everywhere around the world, uh, all across the globe. I'm here in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, in Honolulu, not Honolulu, in Mililani, Hawaii. I just work in Honolulu and lived for many years in Honolulu. That's why I just keep saying Honolulu, and that's what people know more about. Right, most people live in Honolulu, on the island of Oahu. But I live here up in the mountains, and well, I call it mountains. It's just hills, but it's the difference is enough that the temperature here is nice and cool and chill, and it's not a tropical sweatbox. So it's quite different. Um, However, what is also different here is that I moved to Hawaii a little over 20 years ago, in 2000, year 2000, and I live here since then. This is my home, and and of course I've been an audiophile and a music lover since I was a kid, and how and I was exposed to actual music, and very high level music, because my grandfather, he was an extraordinary musical talent. Sadly, he didn't get the chance to be recorded. He was Hungarian, and actually the socialist communist system regarded him as a little bit as a major enemy of the system, and he never got the chance to be recognized for anything. But he got abused plenty, and made and the state really skimmed him really dry for everything he could give. Nevertheless, me as his grandchild, well, just texting that yes, if you are visiting the island, or any of you visiting, you are most welcome to drop by. Please let me know. Please hook up with me, and I'm really, I would be glad to have you over here. We can have a listen. We listen to music, share ideas, thoughts, and a little bit. That's why I started calling initially my videos. I started posting the online audio club to to extend the audio club, the audio community, to more than the island, because what was really special here, I wanted to get to here, is that okay, first, what gear, I will get into that. I will just now finish the introduction about myself, and then I will get to answer the questions. And so how I started is that I had a grandfather who was an astonishing musical talent, and and he just totally defined how I perceive music. He also taught me about music a little bit, but mainly just listening to him sing. He was an extraordinary singer, and most of, actually only some of us are fortunate enough to hear such level of singers sing live. But within those of us, almost no one gets the ability to hear them like singing next to you when you are in the same room, not in a huge concert hall, but in a personal space. And that's like dialing it up a million times compared to experiencing a singer in a concert hall. And I had that experience again and again and again. It really just burned into my heart, basically. And because that's what you are getting when you have a musician who then you realize that music really is a translation from heart to heart or soul to soul, and then it's so much more than just sound. And when I am listening to music, listening to stereo gear, I am looking for that at the most part. Whether that gear is able to translate that quality in the human voice, in in the talent of the players, that it can go through even through musical recordings. And yes, as I have experienced, this type of content in music can get through even through recordings. And there's one uh, misconception in the world, is that when you get a stereo system, the better you get, the more you will be able to enjoy every music, or the more you would be able to enjoy music which is recorded at a fantastic level. But that's not exactly true. If the music is recorded at a very high quality, then you are able to perceive the benefits of the recording mechanism. But if the musicians didn't play from the heart, you will see that progressively better and better. And especially when you see it at a very, or hear it at a very high quality, then you hear that it's just they are kind of like getting paid to play, and they are not giving you content. So that's what I learned as a kid from my grandfather. So he taught me how to hear, uh, the basics of the hearing in stereo, setting up a stereo system, and also how to listen for orchestras, how to listen for real live musicians. And I never had the chance to learn music myself. Uh, I had the chance to learn tons of other things, but not music. And then later in life, it turned out that I had some crazy talent for violin. And if I had started learning violin as a kid, uh, maybe you would know me as a violinist. And uh, and basically, until I turned 20, I never heard an audiophile system. That was the first time I heard one, and it was just totally a mind-blowing experience. And within 1 month, I I had the best experience at that time that I had. I heard a full audio note ongaku system, and I know there's a lot of thoughts about audio note, and is it good, is it bad. uh, I can tell you guys that I heard 3 audio note systems at the very beginning of my hi-fi journey, and all of them were expertly set up, and basically they just topped everything by such a margin that it's like technology coming from an alien civilization compared to some backwater, I don't know what. And and that experience like really started influenced me very heavily. And shortly after that, I moved to Hawaii, and and then I got to know my mentor. It took me a couple of years. So I always talk about my mentor, Stu Ono. He had a store called Audio Directions. And apart from Hawaii, he is not known at all. because only you know him if you visited Hawaii and went to his audio store. Sadly, he passed away in 2015, so you can't do that anymore. But when he was alive, he was known only to his customers, and you would be surprised, to the leaders of the US high-end industry, because many of them knew him and they came to him. So when they were about to introduce a product, they brought it down to him and asked his opinion before it was launched. And because he was known as, basically, I would say most people probably called him, and not most people in general, but people of the top of the audio industry called him, I think, the ultimate golden ear, because he was the person who had hearing, an ability to make distinctions in the sound and describe them to such a level that's just so far beyond anyone else I have met, that basically there's a nice story I can tell about him and his hearing, that basically his analysis of the sound was, after listening to it, was better than analyzing with an oscilloscope. So basically, Ray Kimber had to get a real-time analyzer to verify what Stu was telling him about his cables. And then the real-time analyzer told him that what Stu was hearing was something real. And what he was hearing, what the story is about, is that the color of the insulator on the cable. So when you look at the older Kimber cables, you notice that you see like black and brown and black and some other color. And then after a while, he's not using black anymore. And that's because of my mentor. So he noticed, he was the first one to realize that because what he did is he took apart the Kimber cables and played around with rearranging the different colors of the conductors. And he noticed that when we omit the black insulated wire and use a different color instead, the sound noticeably improves. And with real-time analyzer, Ray Kimber was able to follow up on that, and later on found out that they put carbon in the black conductors, the black not conductor, the insulators, and that the carbon deposits inside create a small leakage, and that's what causes a smear in the sound. So my advice that I learned from my mentor is that for audio purpose, avoid black insulation, avoid the black touching the conductor, because that's going to cause a low level smear. And if you have a very basic equipment, audio equipment, you will not notice that smear, because that smear is below the level of audibility that the system can reproduce. But if you have a medium to higher level system, then you can hear that. So basically, from being no exposure to audio, I suddenly get exposed to my mentor. And 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 it's not just my mentor, it's not just Stu, and his incredible ability to perceive, but he also had the ability to teach how to teach others to get this ability. Plus, he organized the audio community here, and basically when I met him, I also met my audio friends, and we form a really tight circle. And basically for over a decade, almost like 2 decades, we shared our audio journey. And when we were doing things, developing things, we right away just email, call, chat, hang out together. What did you do? What did you experience? When someone purchased something, we went to his house and listened to it, and we just traded gear, all over, tried out in all kinds of different combinations. And in addition, my mentors too, he had audio club meetings. So every month, all of us gathered together in his store, and shared experiences. We brought down our gear, and it was like such a learning experience that's unlike anything I have seen. And I think I got really pampered by him, because when I after even just after like learning from him and seeing him, and not just him but the entire audio community, because I also had I would call him my audio older brother, Kyle Kuroda. He was the first who started to coach me on building amplifiers. He was also Stu's student, but he was kind of like my elder brother in the and there's Charlie, Leonard, and Greg, and all of us. We were really tight, and we are still, and and it's just catapulted our experience so far. And what Stu was really focusing about is to get audio at an affordable level. So he not just believed, but he experienced and knew that if you modify gears in a certain way, and you look for system synergy, then you can go very far with much fewer expenses. And then after 2 years of living in this vibrant community, I visited audio stores, high-end stores in the continental US. I was shocked to the core to hear really expensive systems sound way below the level where, or even at the very entry level where the entry level room of Stu sounded. It was just um, something unusual to me, that and such a shock that the rest of the world is really not exposed to that level of information. And after my mentor, actually, uh, shortly after I have met him, within a few years, then we started like getting to know each other more and more, and basically I ended up like spending over a decade of literally just being in contact with him hours every day for a decade. And and I just learned so much from him. It's just insane. And um, after he passed away, sadly, there was no one really to organize the audio community meetings, because his passing also coincided with me getting into a new position, a new job that's just so time intensive that I was unable to organize meetings, and I was unable to go to audio meetings. So I really lost a lot of connection with my audio buddies, because I'm basically on call. I work in cancer research, in clinical trials, like bringing the next level of cancer treatment to patients, and that does not really allow any kind of flexibility, any kind of planning for me. So even just like thinking about this live stream, to find a time that I know that I will be available to do it, it took me about a month to find that. And some of you, like there's Craig, and we sometimes chat and through Skype, but it's been months since we could do that, because it just I cannot work it out. And that's why I started doing this channel, so that I can stay in touch with the audio community, with the audio world, and then I can continue what Stu was doing, because first of all, he was an educator. He really educated all of us who are in the island, and by now all of us, like I'm thinking of Charlie, Leonard, Greg, Kyle, they are really just amazing sources of information, and they're really seasoned audiophiles, and if any new audiophile could get in touch with us, it is just like a tremendous help for an audio journey. Um, so basically, back to the questions. So yes, Stu's last name was Ono. He was Stu Ono, and let me see. Let's look. Oh my God, Tiago, I'm so sorry to hear that. Actually, that was the same thing. All my relatives on both sides died of cancer. So that was partially why I got into doing what I do for my profession, for my calling. And let's just look at the questions. Oh, Lois, Shaka, I have a lot of family in Oahu. Awesome. That's fantastic. That's what I learned. The world is a really small place, and you will find friends everywhere, no matter how far. You think you're at the end of the world, middle of the ocean, and that's it. You still find people whom you have connections with. It's just okay. How do you like first what gear? Actually, it's been like so long time. I heard them, and I did not hear it in my mentor store, so I cannot really tell any in-depth listening experience with them. And sadly, I live on an island, so basically I got to hear what people have, what people bring in, and now that my mentor is has been gone, and also the past, I would say, decade of his life, he was severely ill, and then he had to close down his store many years. And when he reopened, he reopened only in a limited capacity, so the number of gear he brought in just declined steadily. And I did not hear first what I would say I did not hear them enough to form an in-depth opinion about it. However, there's Tiago. He also posted questions here and comments. He's with us, and he just built his uh, uh, audio camp ACA Nelson Pass amp, which is basically a first watt amp, and then he is just delighted with it. And what I could think, what I would recommend about it, that it is doing extremely well for low level listening, and it gives you more of a sound that you would expect from tube amplifiers, in a way that it lets you more sink into the music. And it's not much more as a party music. So if you get together with your friends and you want to crank up and you want to get a really amazing experience, it will not be on the showy side, so you might get disappointed with that. But if you just turn the volume lower, you will realize, wow, this sounds really great. Listening to other systems, they don't sound good when you listen to quietly. So as an amplifier to be part of your long-term audio journey, I think it's an excellent choice, because the most important part of our journey is ourselves, is our ability to hear and identify what we are hearing, because you can only improve significantly when you are able to identify what is going on in the system, and then you know where you are going, where the equipment is trying to take you, and you can balance it out and reach where you eventually want to get to. And if during that journey you can listen to at lower levels, that will protect your hearing. And that's something extremely important. That's the most fundamental lesson I learned, is that be very, very careful of the level you are listening to, because if you are exposing your hearing to extremely loud level of music, then it's going to deteriorate the ability of your hearing, and you have to crank it up. As 5 years go by, the volume has to be dialed up more and more for you to get the same level of experience, not an increasing level. Just to maintain the level, you have to dial the volume higher and higher. And after a point, you will realize that your hearing is gone. So if you have a system that forces you to play very loud, I would say exercise great caution. So now let me just have more look at the questions. Uh, Nick shared, wow, his grandfather was an electronics genius. My grandfather too, but sadly he didn't get to teach me more. Him about it. Oops. Okay. So he went to MIT. Wow, that's phenomenal. And let me see. I love my Ongaku. I have audio note speakers, and but looking for a speaker that is more efficient that I would enjoy. That's really tough because there's a lot of high efficiency speakers on the market, and I really have not heard any of them that I really liked. Um, but that doesn't mean that they are not out there. What I heard through YouTube, but it's through YouTube only, is the Devor Fidelity. They seem to be like balanced sounding speakers. Uh, I might be able to recommend hearing them and trying them out. They could give you something. But what I could really recommend is Bruce Edgar's speakers. They are horn speakers, but they are unlike any horn that most people have heard. They do not have horn coloration at all. But sadly, Bruce Edgar passed away a few years ago, and if you have the chance to pick up a used pair, that's it. But so his speakers were the only ones which were like the super high efficiency speakers that I could have recommended to buy. And other than what I could recommend, but this is the really hard road, and that's why I had to make the channel, is to build your own, because there's no ready-made solution that is sufficient enough for an Ongaku level system. And I have heard uh, two of my friends, Altec voice of the theater systems, basically A5s modified, but modified extremely, modified extensively. One of them, uh, he had one person trade in his old A5 for a modern system, and then he modified that A5, and when the person who traded it in for the new speaker sounded much better than the A5 sounded, but the modified A5 sounded like in a different realm, like beyond anything you can attain with normal loudspeaker technology. And there's another audio friend of mine, Jeff, and Jeff also, he's an Altec enthusiast and JBL enthusiast, and he modified his A5's crossover and driver components, everything to a very high degree, and his system is just, if someone would have the opportunity to hear that, it's just like sound coming from a different universe. So, and that's why I got into playing with those drivers that the Altec voice of the theater speakers use, because them and the Bruce Edgar full system, the big Bruce Edgar system, I heard several of his, but only the biggest one, with the refrigerator size uh, sub, basically the low horn, the bass horn, refrigerator size bass horn. That was the only one that's similar to that Altec experience, and of course I knew that I they are just too big. The A5 is too big to get into my living room, and that would they would really push the Nelly's patience as well. And I knew that they just I could not fit in my room. So I wanted to get something a little bit more compact, and that's how I spent many years trying to come up how to use the drivers, most of it was brain work, but I also put in probably like more than 500 hours of computer modeling into it. So it was not just that. Plus 15 years what I've learned from my mentor about every loudspeaker technology, how, because what Stu did is that he took apart everything, literally everything. So when someone came up with a new model and like a new Wonderstein or then he, first thing he did, rip the whole, got the whole thing, take it apart and see what's inside. And he did that to amplifiers, cartridges. He took apart cartridges and that, even if it was like the flagship cartridge, he took it apart, doesn't matter. It was maybe like a, you know, $1,000 loss for his business because it was, you know, taken apart, but he did it. And that's how he gained his knowledge, that he took apart everything. and and that's how I started thinking about, and that's how I put together all my knowledge I have on audio, all the knowledge basically that's Stu amassed on loudspeaker technology, how they work, that I learned from him, and my experience of the best sound I heard in my life, that came from those modified Altec speakers. And that's how I developed these speakers that I call the voice of the Lancelot that you see in my videos. And really my channel is to really guide you to where you can build something like that. And they use the Altec 515C and 288 drivers, which is a compression driver. And but these are limited, so you might not be able to get the same drivers. So that's why I want to give more than just a blueprint for them how to make it, because you might not be able to get these drivers. But if you know the concept, you know how to make it work, you can adapt it, and you can translate it for your own reality. And let's just go along with the questions. I just have some scrolling issues. Let's see. Wow, I have people from Poland. Arek, hi Arek, it's just so good to see you. Ryan, let's see. How did you come into Altec? So the first thing Klaus asked, that how did I get into Altec? First, my mentor, he told me about Altec, but he never showed me the sound of it. He just told me, okay, these drivers, the 288 and 515C, these are the end game drivers. So these will be your last speaker. And my first experience with the Altec sound was in the theater. We had a theater at the University Avenue, and curiously, just before it closed down, I got to hear it, and they had Altec speakers in it, and Ampex amplifiers, and I got to hear it, and I was just shocked, like, how come the sound was just so phenomenal there? I never heard anything in my life, because I mostly grew up on this THX, Dolby THX audio, and then Atmos and whatever we have today. And I have not really heard an Altec system, because for most theaters they already tore it down. And I was just shocked that, oh my God, what's this amazing dynamic shading I'm getting from there? What's that really vibrant feel that's coming from it? Uh, oh, what year was I born in? Was that the question? I was born in 77. So, not yesterday, but I grew up in Hungary, and there we did not have Altec systems in the theater, so that's why I missed out. So if you grew up in the US, you had the chance in the same year, then you probably had the chance to grow up with that, with the Altec sound, hearing it in the theaters. And after that, as I said, I had two of my friends who have Altec, full Altec systems, and that's how I just had experienced the best of the Altec sound through their adventures. But Jeff, he has been obsessed with Altec for many decades, and he tried out and experimented with virtually every Altec driver, uh, and and so basically that's the gist of my Altec experience. And so sadly, I did not get to experience a lot of the Altec variations. So what I truly can advise about are those drivers that I'm using, and my friends like Jeff, he used the 414 for the woofer, and that requires a little bit different treatment than the 515C. However, most people do not really use the 515C today. They try to go a little bit lower efficiency, the other drivers of Altec, and because it's easier to tame the other driver. The 515 is the hardest to tame, the hardest to work with, but I hope that I have cracked it, because these Voice of the Lancelots, they just give something I never heard. Hey, bye Rick. He's has to leave now. Thank you for being here. And are there speakers, Michael is asking, are there speakers similar to the Altec 288 515C? Ah, I can't really tell. The tough thing is that they are similar, but because these speakers, these drivers are so expressing, so revealing, even if something is similar but a tiniest bit different, it will sound very different. And also how you approach them, how you build, the tiniest difference in crossover you make will make a tremendous difference. So for example, you can pick like a different compression driver, woofer complement, like using Yamaha drivers, and you can make them sound very similar to the 288 515. But you can get like uh, the 414 driver, and even just another series of the 288, and just keep the same drivers and modify the crossover a tiny bit, and it will sound completely different. So thoughts on GPA's Altec drivers? Uh, Actually, I was thinking about them because my buddy Irvin, he wants to build also his Voice of Lancelot speakers, and he wants to have drivers in it that are in current production. And we were thinking about GPA. I think you can make the GPA drivers work. I have not heard GPA drivers, but what some people are saying who are comparing them is that they prefer the originals. However, when you have the original drivers, then it's not guaranteed what you are getting, because the uh, the Alnico Altex, the Alnico magnet is quite sensitive. So if you drop it, then it can lose quite a bit of the magnetism, and then it loses a lot of its efficiency. And you have to be really careful where those Altecs are coming from, the vintage Altecs that are the pulls, how they were handled, uh, were they abused or not. But to abuse, you really have to crank these because they can handle a lot. But still, it's possible. So if you over abuse them, that also can cause the magnetism to develop problems. I am lucky that I got both of my drivers and they are in good shape. They do not measure the same. They measure quite different from each other, but still that does not preclude them from providing a more satisfactory sound than I ever heard from any other loudspeaker. But it is still a warning that you can get like really drivers that have problems with them. I'm lucky that I have not run into that, but GPA drivers, they take that out of the equation because all of their drivers are very consistent. because they have the original tooling of the Altec. Yes, it's possible to remagnetize the magnet, and that's what GPA is doing. You can send them back your old drivers, and they remagnetize the magnet. They can change the suspension, change the voice coil, or the um, diaphragm for the compression driver, so they can rework. So basically, GPA is the new Altec for these vintage drivers. But the problem with GPA, what I've been hearing, is they are going in and out of business lately, so they have some difficulties. And I heard that they closed down business and they reopened and closed down. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on, and how they are holding up, or is it still available or not, because it's been changing during the past 2 years. Um, Bob is saying, I missed out on a pair of Bruce Edgar speakers. Yeah, that's. I was lucky because I heard several of his, and I heard one of his speakers that he made only 2 units, and Charlie has one of them, and it's a single driver horn speaker. It's a backloaded horn. It's quite huge, and it uses a loader driver, and that was just the best, by far the best loader loudspeaker I heard. It did not have the loader shout, because those drivers are really known for becoming shouty, and Bruce Edgar managed to really do it with just like a modicum of shout, I would say. And for many, it was just a treat to listen to, just unbelievable. So Nick, do you mean everyone freaking out about the current tube shortage? And Upscale Audio said not to worry, they are being produced. Still just a matter of time. Okay, so I am not worried at all about the tube shortage, and I know this is going to come from a really biased point of experience, because I am not using current production tubes at all. And the reason for that is that older production tubes, they were produced with much longer lifespan, and they were voiced different. They were voiced for having the best mid-range, and now the modern production tubes are voiced to have emphasized bottom end and overemphasized top end, and the mid-range is kind of becoming gritty, and to me it's kind of like going into I would say it in a derogatory way, a solid state sound, but there are good solid state amplifiers. Don't think about them. Think about those solid state amps which leave you wanting for better mid range. And so that's why I've been avoiding using current production tubes, because that's how I started my audio journey. I started with current production tubes, and I noticed that after 1 year in my Dynaco Stereo 70, they went all poof, and I had to get another set. And by that time, I got experience that if we had a Stereo 70 shootout with Stu, we brought down like a dozen modified Stereo 70s, each of them modified different way, and we got to compare them into the same system, one after the other, and we had to got to hear what the differences are. And I realized that that the tube makes the biggest difference. So when we listen to the Stereo 70s, the best sounding unit was Stu's unmodified Stereo 70 with full Mallard power tube and rectifier complement. That just by far trounced everything. And of course, at that time, I couldn't really afford Mallard tubes, and I still don't think that it would be such a good idea to burn money on premium NOS tubes. And that's why I build my own audio gear. And go for tubes which are relatively unknown, and for the vacuum tube pricing, there's desirability and market need is the number one factor that drives up the price. So the solution to get good tubes for gear is to modify the gear to use a different tube, an unknown tube, because for NOS tubes, there are vast stocks in the world. So if you go for something relatively unknown, like a 807 power tube, uh, there's just like millions of them. And actually, people now started to go towards 807. That was one power tube that my mentor mentioned to me about. It is a variety of 6S6, and it is was used for the telegraph system. It was a telecommunications tube and was designed for extreme reliability. And I think it's probably the best sounding 6L6 variety, and it can handle by far the highest plate voltage. It has a plate cap. But I think now I'm getting a little bit off track about that question, because most probably when you asked that question, you meant that how it's going to impact all of the audio world, the the tube amps that you currently have. I would say I don't know. I don't know the importers of the vacuum tubes, and as Stu passed away, also he used to bring in tubes, so I cannot tell anything because he's gone. But I would recommend for all of you who use vacuum tube gear is to look out for NOS tubes now, because this tube shortage or the specter of tube shortage is going to drive up the prices of vacuum tubes, and not necessarily because they're going to run out, but because the panic and hysteria, people are buying now, or they want to start buying, or maybe if there will be a true vacuum tube shortage, then they will start buying more and more of the NOS tubes of the old stock. And if you think that the old stock tubes prices are very high now, it within like 5-10 years they will be like maybe like 10 times the price we are experiencing now. And that's what I experienced in my audio journey from 20 years ago to now, is that the price of the old stock tubes just exponentially goes up like crazy. And then tube prices I thought 15 years ago were crazy high, they're nothing, they were a fraction of what they cost today. So the best decision at that time would have been to just buy a bunch of them, and now I could have a lot of good stock tubes. But of course, I couldn't afford to buy like crate loads of 300Bs and PX25s and stuff like that, and other Western Electric tubes. However, what I have maybe like 5-10,000 NOS tubes, which are not these well-known tubes. So Stu used to collect, my mentor used to collect like a ton of stuff, like crazy amount of stuff. So if you went to his store, it looked like you arrived to some really enchanted land. So like if someone was a non-audiophile, hey, greetings from Denmark. I cannot. Greetings. Uh, First of all, on the outside it looked like a junkyard, because even outside his store he had heaps of stuff, and I did not find his store because it was covered by audio gear, crates of vacuum tubes, and everything on the outside. And and I was biking around. I didn't even have a car at that time, and I up and down the street. I knew it was on Young Street, but I couldn't find it. And then Charlie was telling me, just look for the junkyard. And oh yeah, there's the place that looks like a junkyard. And then when I got close, then I saw that, oh my God, all that thing that looked like junk from the outside, from the street. When I got close, it's just like thousands of vacuum tubes like piled up, just like, what on earth is that? It just keeps that outside. What's going on? And then he had his kidney failure. He had to go on dialysis. He had to close down his store, and he moved all his valuable stuff to storage. And he had tons of stuff that he had to throw away because he couldn't keep, couldn't maintain. And us who were the audio club buddies who were close to Stu, like there's like 30 of us or more. We helped him move out his store, and he said, "Okay, guys, here I'm getting a huge container." And he got like a giant container to throw away stuff that he couldn't store. And he said, like, anything else, anything that we would throw in the container, just take home, it's yours. It's much better if it lands with you. And of course, I took all of those vacuum tubes that no one wanted, because these are just really just weird tubes, like numbers that if you mention, say like, I never even knew that there's a tube that exists that has that number. So that's how I ended up a bunch of tubes like that. And I did that because Stu told me that for the vacuum tubes, it's not that specific vacuum tube that's the only good one. Those tubes which are legendary, like 300B, 2A3, or KT88, now the new production, other KTs which are based on the KT88 and the KT series, which is actually a version of the 807. So the 80 version, 807, is a KT66. Not exactly the same, but very similar. They are the same family of tube. So if you love the NOS KT66, but you can't afford $500 to get one, then just get an 807 for $20, and you're getting the same tube. And my experience with them, because I modified my single-ended amp to, so I tried both of them in it. You have to modify, you need different tube sockets and a little bit different biasing to use them. But basically, uh, the most pedestrian version of 807 has a better mid-range than even Osram KT66s, which go for $500. Yes, the Osram has better bass, has a better top end extension, but after I made the change, for the first 2 weeks, I was happy. Oh, I'm getting better bass, I'm getting better top end. But after a month, I wished dearly for life, I want my 807 back, because the mid range is not happening, and I'm not enjoying the sound. I don't like this at all. And there's the smoky glass KT66, the CV version, and that has the mid-range as well, but it's just so unreal and unrare that you can find that and you can buy that. And if it just goes like have like $1,000 plus to replace it, it's like, no, just go for $20, and you have, essentially the same level of experience, maybe like 10% less bass response, but that's not the end of the universe. So it's funny building something with unique tubes. I'd rather do that often. And that's what I will be teaching here, and sharing about how to discover new tubes, because essentially all tubes do the same thing, and what you need to do is just bias them up differently, load them differently, and just make sure that along the amplification curves you are getting proper headrooms everywhere, you are getting proper impedance matching throughout the path, and basically there's like tons of undiscovered tubes that people have not tried using for audio, but they have amazing potential. And then you have things like spud amps. If you look searches for spud, then you will find tons of examples for unknown tubes, like 6EM7 and others, being used and discovered, and people notice, oh my god, this like, I bought this power tube for $2 and I'm enjoying more than my what my really expensive amplifier is doing with those extremely expensive tubes. And let's see, people need patient and others. What? I think I have missed a lot in the thread. I'm just reading the last comment from Nick. Oh, variants 6, 12, AX7 variants. So ECC 83 needs some minor tweaks, so much better than any ECC 83 ever made. So basically the ECC 83 and the 12AX7, that's the family of tubes. And they are made so that you bias up them up the same way. They have the same gain, they have the same plate resistance, or roughly the same, like in a very close range. So basically it means they are interchangeable, and they use a similar plate structure and same mode of operation. And it's something that's been used very, very frequently. It's probably the most popular signal tube ever, the one that's been manufactured in the highest numbers, and that's why they started making more variations. So basically the 12AX7 was the US name for it, what RCA and GE used in their nomenclature, and the ECC and the EC names were the European nomenclature. So when it came out from the European factories, that was labeled as EC, ECC 83 and those varieties. And of course each factory had their own different way of doing certain things, like how they anneal certain parts, what was the metal selection, what was the plate size, what material the plate is used, and each of these tiny differences do make differences in how, what is the sound you are getting from them. And also there's differences in the tolerances they were made of. So like the better series were made with much better tolerance, so it means that how they manufacture it, the sizes are much more consistent, and that's why when you use them, they bias up in a more precise way. They keep their bias better. They age much better. They have much lower noise floor. So one key aspect of vacuum tube design is to make the structure rigid, so that it doesn't resonate. It doesn't pick up acoustic vibrations through the envelope, and that's transmitted into the plate structure. That's called microphonics. But also as the signal passes through the vacuum tube, there's an electric field. So there's the plate. So the plate is basically the envelope that you see in the glass, that metallic plate, and that provides the positive voltage. So there's a shortage of electrons on the plate, and on the inside there's the cathode that's at the very center. Now it's if an indirect heated tube, then within the cathode there's the filament. So then the cathode is wrapped around the filament. If it's a direct heated tube like the 300B, then the filament itself is the cathode. So the cathode is emitting electrons. It's negatively polarized. So electrons are coming out, and they're going to the plate. And if you have this situation, so you have a cathode and a plate, that's called the rectifier tube. To change it to a tube that is capable to amplify a signal, you need to put a grid between your cathode and your plate, and you apply a negative voltage onto the grid, and that will prevent your cathode from seeing the plate. So the plate will become invisible. So the charge that is present at the plate will become as if it's not existing, because the charge of the grid cancels out that that electric pool that the cathode sees. And if the grid structure that cancels, that negates out the pull of the plate is better, is of higher quality, then you will notice it as a much better sound. And the difference between these 12AX7 ECC83 varieties, by far the one that makes the biggest noticeable difference is how the grid is wound. and the best versions, that's why they are so expensive, because for example there's like golden grid versions that use gold threads for the grid, and that offers a lot of things. So gold is really heavy, so that's not going to vibrate and oscillate as much when it's exposed to that onrush of electrons that are just flying through the plate. And when they're flying, that also means like a sudden change in the electrical field. So it means that the grid itself will be pushed and pulled towards closer to the plate or closer to the cathode, depending on what's the polarization of itself and what's the electron stream it's facing. So basically, the heavier material it's made of, the less it's going to react to signal changes. And that's why for these premium tubes, you will have much better low-level um, capabilities and finer details. Let's see, tube shortage. What makes more difference in your view, preamp or amp? So every part of the audio component is basically a limiter. So nothing that you can throw into the system will make it sound better. There's an information content that is stored in the media, whether it's record or digital. There's the information. And the best we can do is to retrieve all of that information. However, when we have the chain, that information is going to, some of it is going to get lost. And other parts of it are going to get changed, altered. And then we hear the end result. And now for these processes, what is going to get lost is totally neglected by the audio community. And that's why I am advocating the purist systems, because they have the least amount of losses. They allow you to get the most out of your signal. And now there's the distortions. And the problem with the distortion is that at the beginning, the amplifier is your greatest enemy. So that's what, when you change an amplifier, that's what makes perhaps the majority of the differences that you can achieve. But that's because preamplifiers at a low price point, I would say not even price point, because it's not up to the price, but most of the preamps that are on the market do not have the ability to pass through enough information to make them count as much as possible. But once you have your amplifier, or I think I might have said this the other way around. So most lower end amplifiers don't allow you to hear whether you have a good preamp or not. So if you have a budgeter amplifier, and under that I mean an amplifier that is unable to pass through information content, then it won't matter as much what your preamplifier is capable to do. But once you have an amplifier that is able to pass through content, then the preamp will be probably the Achilles heel of your system. So that was my audio progression, and that's the audio progression of most audiophiles I've seen. Is that number one, we have to figure out the loudspeaker that works in our room, because it's not such a thing that there's a best loudspeaker or one is better than the other, but you need to match the loudspeaker to your room. So the room loudspeaker interface, that's the most critical in the audio system. The other most critical is the part that reads out, that converts the information from your media to a signal that can be interpreted by the preamp and the amplifier. However, if your signal chain is not good enough, so the preamp doesn't let through a lot of detail, the amplifier doesn't let through a lot of detail, distorts a lot, changes a lot, then the source, you will not be able to hear what the source is able to provide if you have a narrow line connecting to the speakers. So the best progression is to have the loudspeaker room interface done properly, and that also means that if you have a small room, then a big Altec system might not be the best there, or a big loudspeaker which is overloading the room. However, what you can do, even if you have higher efficiency loudspeakers, you can actually make them work in a smaller room, but you have to adapt them. You cannot use the speaker that works in a huge room to work in a tiny room. I have heard Altec A5 work in an almost near field situation, so where I'm sitting 2 meters from the A5 and it sounded amazing. Tom Choi did that. But I also have to add that the room in which he played, it was like a very big room, but with panels. There was a smaller secluded area. So and there's a grain of salt about that because the total air volume was much bigger, but the horns were literally like almost in my face, and it worked beautifully. But he has a lifetime of experience how to make that work. Uh, Yet, for us, we have to figure out how to make work the loudspeaker in our room, number one. Then find an amplifier that matches that loudspeaker the best. And then comes the source, improving your source. And then when the source is of a level high enough, then you will notice the shortcomings of your preamplifier. And and I would say that the best preamplifier I can recommend is a passive preamplifier. They are not the best, but to have an active preamp that allows as much information across it as a passive preamp, it's just orbitally expensive. Another passive preamp, I mean the transformer autoformer based preamplifiers. Because if you have a resistor based, that's like a break. So if you have your normal attenuators that we have in our active preamplifiers, nowadays there's like gain clones and digital means that's a total game changer. But if you have a preamplifier that has the passive attenuator, then when you attenuate a signal passively, you are breaking it, and basically you are cutting away information content from it. And when you have a transformer or autoformer to change the volume, then basically you are shifting gears. And you, as you are cutting the signal level shorter, you are transforming the amplitude of the signal to drive capacity. So you are going to be able to drive the next stage with higher power, higher efficiency, better control. And instead of, so when we turn the volume down, instead of the sound becoming weaker, you make the drive capability better. And there's one problem with that it's passive. So if your system doesn't have enough gain to accommodate for it, so your amplifier needs a lot of gain, then you won't be able to get enough volume out of it. So for amp, preamp, I would say that first concentrate on your amp, and then concentrate on your input source, on your DAC or phono stage turntable. And when you have them right, then go into preamp and find out what's the best preamp that can take it to the next level. So let's see. Ooh, there's lots more text. I mean, chat. That's why set sounds the best. Less in the weight and vacuum helps a lot with energy transfer if made correctly. I think I missed somehow my... Okay, it was stuck. I did not see the thread. Computer screen got stuck there. I think I have missed a lot. That's why... I think Kenneth probably posted that in response to what I was saying. So vacuum helps a lot with the energy transfer. So this is one of my theories, and that's what I experienced, that when there is something in the path of the signal that is capable to block it or change it, then it's going to alter it. It's going to take out parts of the signal. It's going to change the signal. When you have a solid state device, in the solid state device, the electrons that carry the signal, they have to go through that semiconductor layer. So basically that is a doped glass, a silica layer with boron and other different chemicals added to it. So basically it has to bump from atom to atom, jump, thump, thump, thump. And each time an electron goes from an atom to the next atom, it undergoes changes in the state, and it takes time as well. Of course, realistically, the time a conductor conducts, it's at relativistic velocities, so we think it's not affecting things. But because we are dealing with not a DC current, so just a one-way ticket. If it's just a one-way ticket and we are going at close to the speed of light, doesn't matter what's on the road. We'll get there much faster than the speed of sound. However, for electrical signals, it's an alternating current. So it has to go one way, back, one back, or back and forth, back and forth. And that back and forth motion, it sets up resonances. It sets up resonant patterns. And when that gets into the picture, that's when things get so much more complicated. So if the electron has to do that sort of thing, then there are changes in the signal. And for a vacuum tube, the electron travels in a vacuum. There's no interaction. So it's the same electron that was emitted from the cathode that reaches the anode. And in a semiconductor, that's not the same electron. There will be like billions, trillions of electron exchanges on the path. So there is a minuscule alteration in the signal, but as we are having several gain stages, and we are basically, the amplification starts at a very minuscule level. We are basically talking about nanowatts, like billionth of a watt, or even lower than that. And from that energy level, we have to ramp up to the several watt scale to make it audible through the loudspeaker. And whatever happens at the very beginning of that domain is just having a big impact for the end result. Bye, Tiago. He has to go. Thank you for being here. I'm glad you could make it. Honestly, how important is the quality of the rectifier tube in power supplies used for tube amps? It makes a lot of difference. I would say the schematics itself and the amplifier makes the biggest difference. But the rectifier tube alone, I will give you an example with my Stereo 70. So when we brought down my Stereo 70 for that shootout that we had with Stu, and I honestly thought that mine will be the best sounding of the lot. And it turned out that mine wasn't the worst sounding, but it ended up the last three, the worst three of them. And guys, check it out. All of the other amps, or the other Stereo 70s, they used NOS tubes. Either US NOS or even some had Mallard tubes. Actually, Stu's was the only one that had the full Mallard component. Most of them had NOS RCAs and GEs, and then also it turned out that one of my Softec power tubes in one channel blew. It did not really blow totally because the cathode was still working. So I mean, the filament was working. The tube lit up, but it stopped working. So on one channel, I had distortion coming because of the push-pull pair, only one tube was working. But even in that condition, it wasn't the worst sounding tube. And so I was just astounded. And but later on, I was so heartbroken that it sounded so bad. First, found out that tube was out, changed it. Whoa, okay, now it sounds way better. But then Stu said, okay, Janos, you have that Softec rectifier tube here. Here's the Mallard rectifier. Change it for that. And I was like, my God, this changed from being a fun DIY amplifier that I love to a extremely high level sound, like jumping up like 3 or 4 categories in price. So like if we were to like talk about prices, like maybe like a $1,500 amplifier to a $25,000 amplifier, and that was just that single tube. But I have to add that Mallard 5AR4s, they are really pretty damn well made from the Blackburn factory, because now we have all kinds of reissues, and the problem is that there's a lot of faking going on. So basically they are taking the Softec 5AR4 because the plate looks quite similar to the Mallard's plate, and they just put the diamond logo on it, and they sell it as Mallard, and then people try it out and they say that this NOS rectifier thing is bullshit because it doesn't sound any different from the new tube. And yes, because that's the new tube, it's just you had sold a fake. But when you try the real thing, it makes a big difference. But I also tried a bunch of different 5VR4 varieties, and I can say that all of the NOS ones sounds leagues better than the new ones, but I stopped playing around with modern production rectifier tubes and tubes at all in general 10 years ago. So maybe since then they improved on it, but I don't want to spend money on that to find it out, because basically I, I don't want to waste resources. I have enough tubes to last me several lifetimes, and but for all of you, and the feedback I'm getting, what my friends were experiencing, what people who tried based on my advice to go for NOS rectifier tubes, they tried it out, big eyes like, oh my god, this was the best upgrade, this is fantastic. So, and there's one more thing with vintage rectifier tubes and with the Mallard tube, is that their lifespan is much longer. So if you have a Dynaco Stereo 70, for example, I'm just telling my exact experience that I had. If you use a Softec 5AR4, it will last 1 year in it, and then it will burn out. You have to get a new one. If you use a Mallard in it, there are people who have their original Dynacos from 1960, and they are still using the original rectifier tube that came with it. So it will probably last you a lifetime. And yeah, it costs like 20 times more, but it will last more than 20 times longer. So ultimately, on the long run, having an NOS tube is cheaper than buying a new production. Now, that Mallard 5EF4 is kind of an extreme on reliability for that. For the majority of NOS tubes, you are not going to get that extreme jump, but you will still will get a really major improvement, like lasting for 10 years instead of one, and still sounding like way better. Let's have more look at tubes. I also like 7025 in the V1 spot. So the 7025, that's also a 12EX7 variety. And the naming is, so if you see them labeled by 4 numbers, that's the US military labeling. So it means like the 725, the tube was developed for rockets. and military control applications. So basically, the requirement for those tubes is extreme reliability and extreme ability to handle shock and extreme circumstances. So that will translate into having virtually no microphonics and much higher quality parts put inside the vacuum tube. And when you see any vacuum tube with those four numbers, hello Yannick, you just stuck there, uh, then then that will tell you that those tubes are really rugged and much more reliable than the tubes having numbers and letters mixed up in them. So the 12AX7, that nomenclature is the commercial tube nomenclature for American vacuum tubes, where the first two letters indicate the filament voltage, so it means it runs on 12.6 volts, and the letters and numbers that follow the AX7 that indicate the type of the tube which is inside. So the 7 that indicates the number of electrodes inside the tube, and the AX, that's the series. And there's, for example, there's like BZ, BX, BA, all kinds. But when you see those numbers changed, you are getting something very different. However, there's like things like little secrets that people don't know, is that when you switch the first number to a different number, then you get the same tube but different plate voltage. So a nice way to find tubes which are the same quality but much lower price is to go for a different filament version and change the filament voltage in your unit. But for now, you need to go to DIY and able to fiddle around with the voltages. So if you have that ability, then you can hunt for much cheaper tubes. And by the way, if you lower the filament voltage, you go from 12 volts down to 6 volts, that's going to cut the noise, the inherent noise of the vacuum tube to much, much lower. So basically you are getting a quieter, better sounding tube with better distortion characteristics if you go for a lower filament version. So CV378. So the CV, that's the British military nomenclature. So when you see those two letters, then it means that they came out from UK and they are built with military specifications. And to find the best treasures in the tube world, you just look for tubes which are called CV. So the CV tubes, these are made really to the highest standards. Can you use 5852? But you need to bear in mind it draws almost double as much current. So there are also tubes that have the same pinout, so it means that their legs are compatible. So for vacuum tubes, there are several things that identify a vacuum tube, and the number one is that when you look at a vacuum tube, it has its legs. You know, those metal bits sticking out at the bottom of the tube, they're called the tube pins, and they have numbers, and they're called like number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and depending on how many legs a tube has, like for example the 12EX7 family, they have 9 legs, so it's a 9-pin tube, and each of the pins have a specific functionality added to it. So and if you have another tube where the pins have the same function, so the filament is on the same pin, the grid, the plate, the cathode is on the same pin, then technically you can physically change the tube without blowing it up or blowing your amplifier up. However, it depends on the plate structure and the grid structure in the tube that whether it will electrically behave as the same way as the tube you wanted to replace. And depending on your amplifier or your preamp or the position you are employing a vacuum tube, it will allow you a certain range of vacuum tubes. So you, in some amplifiers or preamps, they are specifically specify that you need to use only this variety, because other variety might draw higher plate current, and that can damage your amplifier. Maybe the resistors in the path, in the high voltage path, they are not rated to dissipate as much heat that would be drawn by the higher current, and that will lead to damage in your unit. But in general, if a vacuum tube draws and can draw higher current, then it means that it can also put out higher current of output. So it means that it's giving out more output signal, or also it translates into lower plate impedance. So the impedance is getting better. It's late for my weed brains here. Thank you, Kenneth, for being with us. And I think probably for me, I will have to stop soon because I'm running here on the phone battery. and, and I'm just amazed that the battery is lasting still. So I will have a hard limit on that at one point. So basically, that's one other consideration of vacuum tubes, is that there are some super vacuum tubes, like for example, for the ECC family, 12EX7 family, there's the 12BZ7. Hey, Mark. So the 12BZ7 is the same as a 12EX7 electrically, but it draws double the plate current, and it has half the plate resistance, and it also draws double filament power. And that means that in many applications you can use it, but you have to be mindful that if it's a really budget amplifier or preamplifier, they probably made it to just barely draw as much current as you can. Yes, 12BZ7, that's it. And in the most budget preamps or amps, I do not recommend putting 12BZ7, because that would probably burn out your filament transformer, and as it's drawing twice as much current, so you don't have headroom for that. But if you have a high quality unit, then that they are built with headroom for both filament power and also headroom for the resistors in the high voltage circuit that allow, and also like the plate load, if it's a resistor, uh, or if it's an IC, like a constant current load or something like that, it needs to have that headroom to be able to dissipate twice as much heat. And if it does, you can try the 12BZ7. It has the same gain as the 12EX7, but half the plate resistance. And then that's a huge thing, because the advantage of the 12EX7 family of tubes, all of them, is that they have a gain of 100, and that's tremendous. But the drawback is that they have a very high plate resistance. And to find a great vacuum tube, you need very high gain and very low plate resistance. And that's not really happening. And there are some tubes when it's happening, but those are like the ultra rare and very expensive tubes. And I can't really recommend them, because if you find any of those, like they call them like super triodes, super tubes, they're just really expensive and not that much affordable. However, there are solutions like the 12BZ7, which is like totally affordable. It's just like $1 or $2 per tube, and you're getting a really high quality 12EX7. So if you could do a series of videos about open baffles, yes, I love open baffles. Sadly, I did not try many iterations on open baffles. For myself, I built only one pair, but my friends have built different ones, played around with different configurations, but we all played around with the traditional open baffle. So when you look at Danny at GR Research, he's playing around with using what I think that's what he calls like a Helmholtz resonator for the bass, and so basically he is using reinforcement for the bass to come out, and using different strategies like extreme H frames or like woofers firing at each other in a slot configuration. So I have not experimented on those. I have experimented with the regular open baffles, which is really like you have a panel and you have a single driver or multiple drivers on it. And mine was the Zenith, the 49CZ series, the 12-inch woofer, and Glow in the Dark Audio. He also has one like that, but on his website, glowinthedarkaudio.com, he built it without the tweeter. So he's using the big one as a full range. And in mine, I was lucky to have found it. Actually, it was I found it on the street. The console was thrown out, and we put it in the backseat of the car. And first I listened to it in the console. I was just shocked how good it sounded. I didn't expect something from the 50s, like discarded, just tossed on the street. Probably it rained on it for a couple of days before I found it. But then I just put them in an open buffer, did a lot of experimenting on the crossover, and it sounded shockingly good. And I'm going, let's see what Ed is. Hi, Ed from New York. He's a musician from New York, and I'm just so honored and so glad to have musicians with us on the channel, because the audio community, the audio files, what we really need is input from musicians like Ed and Nick, and that's just absolutely invaluable, because they have the skills, they understand music, they speak the language of music, and they are here to teach us about how to get in touch with that, how to connect with that, what is it that made them musician, and how, and their experiences on what they hear through the audio system, that they are invaluable, because they just give uh, a very different level of feedback for us than someone's knowledge who never studied music and doesn't just listens to it. It's kind of like hearing what a painter, or let's say what a surgeon tells you about cancer, or a cancer researcher tells you about cancer, versus a patient or a person. Not I wouldn't even say a patient, because because the patient has personal experiences about it, but a person who never had cancer in his family and just heard things about it on the news, has some ideas and tells you about it. Yeah, it's very different from when you are hearing it from a professional or from a person who went through cancer. That's what we want to, and that's in our situation. A person who went through cancer is the person who has a lot of experience with music, like me, like went to hundreds of symphony concerts, grew up with my grandfather. From from before I have memories, I heard his voice singing, and growing up like that, it just has teaches you what to listen to, how to connect, what to recognize in music, and that's an experience. So I am like a cancer patient for you guys, and I'm also a little bit like the cancer researcher, like the surgeon, because I went through the intense process of learning how audio gear works, how to build the systems, what is the difference between an ongaku and the sheet product. And it's not just the price, the concept, what is inside, how if you were to take a sheet and turn it into an ongaku, how can you do that? So so when you have this type of experience, then you can really help others. So I'd appreciate talking about how to connect with music better. That is really rarely explored topic in the audio community. So I learned from my grandfather, who was this amazing musician. So he taught me how to do that. Number one, he said, when you listen to music, close your eyes. Because, and later on, when I became a biomedical scientist, I learned that 70% of the brain power that is working on the perceptions we are getting from the outside world goes for our visual cortex. So 2/3 of our brain is occupied by what we see. And if we close the eyes, then it's not just you are not seeing anymore, but your brain shunts a lot of the processing power to our hearing. And basically, with closed eyes, your hearing acuity will tremendously boost. It will be boosted to an extreme level. And it's not just like you close your eye and right away you hear 10 times more. It doesn't work like that. The brain is an adaptive system. So for the full effect to take place, you need to rest your eyes for a good long time. And that's why if you go to a symphony concert, so when I go to concerts, that's the first thing I do. First, I make a visual inspection and I gauge how the whole acoustics are, where the people are sitting. And it's kind of like an analytical audiophile mode. And then I sit down and first listen for a minute or two with open eyes, and then I close my eyes and I let my brain, let my hearing accommodate, acclimate to the to hearing more, to making my hearing the primary perception. There is another trick I learned. This is from, I call him Riccardo Sensei. He's Riccardo Serafini. He's an outstanding musician. He's a pianist, and he was Hector Villa-Lobos' student, and he still is, but obviously Senor Lobos is not with us anymore, and he told me that do this. So put your hands to your ears, so in that way you are increasing the size of your earlobes, and you will be amazed how much more detail, how much more you hear from the sound. So if you want to hear the most out of the music, then close your eyes and do this. And of course, if you do this, then that will be uncomfortable after a while and your shoulders will start cramping up. But just closing your eyes, relaxing to it, will put you in the mind frame to, number one, hear more of the music and allow you to connect to the music, connect to it at more levels, so you will be able to experience it as more than just sound. It will be, you will feel more the emotion contact, more. To me, it's like the intent of the composer coming through. It's a very interesting experience, and the more time you spend listening to music with your eyes closed, the more and more it will ramp up in your life. So after you've been practicing that for a decade, then the difference between listening with eyes open and eyes closed will be astonishing, totally on a different order. So that's my first advice to connect to music, is to close the eyes. And the second thing that my grandfather said is that when you hear someone, a musician, do not clap after that. And he told me that if someone claps after he sings, that's the greatest insult. And that's because when music comes from a very deep place and it reaches your heart, number one thing, you are unable to clap after that. So if the music reached you, then after that you will sit in contemplation. And one thing that I noticed, that when I was listening to my grandfather singing, and there was the connection. After that, I couldn't even say anything. My voice, my throat was almost like inability to speak, and inability to move the hands, inability to stand down. All I could do is just, I felt the music everything, the message that came from the song just resonate in me. And I remember when I had my 21st birthday, then we had a big family gathering, and my grandfather sang, and after he stopped, everyone was silent. No one could say a word. No one could move a hand. My mom, she is frantic about clapping after every performance, and especially if she likes the performance. Every single time, and she was unable to move a finger or anything. We just sat in total silence. No one clapped. And that's why my grandpa said that if the music reaches you, then you are not thinking about clapping. You are only clapping when you were not there to listen to the performance. Your brain, your mind was not there. You were thinking about maybe what I'm going to eat for lunch. Does it sound good enough? Or maybe, I need more bass on the amplifier. Now what I'm hearing, this is telling me so that I need to get a better preamp. So while you are running through that monkey wheel, you are not connecting to the music. And that's why just close the eyes, and that will help you to get in that state. And when you are in that state and you are able to receive that from your stereo, that's when you arrived home. Thank you, Nick. And guess what? Nick is another musician. He's a professional musician. and and he's a guitar player. My grandfather, he was a singer and he was a mandolin player, so he played the mandolin and clarinet. So string instruments and close the eyes goes hand in hand. Um, hey, Andre from Brazil. Como vai, Andre? So good to see you too. And it is yeah. So actually, I lived in Brazil, so that's why I'm so overjoyed that Tiago was here. He's also from Brazil, and Andre in Brazil is just fantastic. It just brings me back fantastic memories, and I'm truly overjoyed that you're pursuing audio in Brazil. It's just fantastic. And curiously, my voice of Lancelot loudspeakers, the wood that I use from them, it's from Brazil. So when I got them, it's just like, oh my God, made in Brazil. I was just so happy to have a piece of Brazil here with me, because I've been missing it so much. So I think thank you everyone for this wonderful live stream. I just realizing that it's been almost 2 hours. Oh my goodness, I'm totally probably butchering my phone now. Poor phone. Is it hot? Yeah, it's searing hot. So I think that there's just so many comments. What I will do is just go through the comments and then try to make more videos on all of them to respond to you. And this been really fantastic to touch base with all of you real time and to share a little bit more about my journey. And oh, and one more thing before I totally close. Nick just said that Ongaku has approximately 5% THD, and so I think people shouldn't be so concerned until hearing the amplifier. The this is a very complicated subject, but also Ongaku has 5% THD at rated full power, and that's something very crucial to know, that how THD works, what THD is composed of, because for the Ongaku, the THD is composed of second and third order harmonics. So almost all of that is these two harmonics. And these two harmonics are there naturally for every sound you hear. And of course, it will be noticeable when you hear it. but there will be no high order harmonics. No, high order harmonics are something that do not occur naturally to sounds. They come naturally from certain sounds like trumpet and saxophone and instruments that have metal in it, and they give metallic sound. Uh, um, but the meaning of that is that our ears are really sensitive to that glassy metallic noises, and when that type of distortion comes up, that's what throws a big wrench in the perception of sound. And another thing is that the how distortion happens to normal instruments. So when you are playing a violin, when you play it louder and louder, then you will have increasing third order harmonic distortion with it. And that's how, for example, you can play how loud the violinist plays, not just because the SPL coming from the violin, but the harmonic spectrum is changing from all natural sound, including human voice. And that natural spectrum change affects the second and third order. And when it's affecting the higher orders, then that tells your ears there's something unnatural happening. And now, when, oh, awesome, Vangelis, there's something, oh, Pipis Pinopoulos, oh, you're from Greece. I will have a story for you for next time, because I just recently bought one Vangelis album from Greece, and I think that's the very best album ever, and I haven't talked about it. And I will mention that, but that will be, oh, can I keep the stream up? Yes, I will try that. I will try to make it maybe like a monthly event, and because for you it's also hard to stay here. But going back for the distortion spectrum, because for natural sounds, the second and third order harmonic distortion goes up as the volume of the instrument goes up. That's why it's very critical that for an amplifier to have the same distortion characteristic. And that's what the ongaku does. When you play it at very super soft volume, then the THD component of it is virtually zero. And as the volume starts to go up, so it goes past 1%, way above 1 watt. So basically, at all of those levels where you are listening to the ongaku, everything that contains the entire human dynamic range will be of negligible THD. And only the dynamic peaks like timpani, boom, big kettle drum swing, or the boom, the big whatever whoosh of an instrument like an organ pipe, those will be the only ones that contain a significant amount of THD in it. And that's when you are looking for an amplifier, look for an amplifier that has that type of behavior, that THD has only very low order components, and they are minimal or vanishing at up to like a 1 watt level, and then they start gradually and incrementally climbing up. So THD profiles like high at low volume, which is the characteristic of most solid state amplifiers. So they have vanishingly low THD at higher output, but as we drop the output, the THD goes up, and our brain cannot process that. Even though the THD is vanishingly low, but our brains are capable of realizing that something is going on, because it's the distortion that is telling us subtle cues about imaging. And that's one reason why solid state amps image really flat. So when we talk about imaging of audio gear, solid state gear do not have that depth, that flash to them. And that's because one reason for that is that their THD curve is not matching what the ear wants to hear, but it goes the other way around. Hi Lou, this is an honor to have you here. Lou is someone who has more experience with audio than I do. He is at the level of where my mentor was, and I am learning from him a lot. And it's just an honor to have you here. So Great Plains Audio is a brand from Japan. Wow. Oh, alternative to Great Plains Audio is a brand from Japan. Okay, sorry guys, I'm just goofing here. Um, Japanese brands. Which brand would that be? I do not really know that much the Japanese brands, sadly, uh, because I have not had the fortune to find them here. However, I know that Yamaha, Craig put me up to it. Yamaha has high efficiency drivers, both woofer and compression drivers, which are, they look to be of the same quality as these big Altec drivers. So basically the Yamaha 15-inch woofer that looks like a Hartley. So the motor structure and basket and even the cone material, it looks like a giant Hartley. And the compression driver, the big Yamaha compression, it's very similar to the Altec and JBL compression drivers, even in its parameters. So please do a video on past or present commercially available equipment that you like. And I will also keep Nick the stream up, and we'll get more Vangelis. Oh, Hoops, praise Hoops, Mr. Groove. He has great comments. I love his comments. So thank you everyone for being here, and I'm logging out. And have a wonderful day or sleep well. Thank you for joining me for this first live stream. And who said Goto is the brand? Oh, wow! I didn't know about that. Western. Oh, thank you. That's something to really keep an eye out for. So, thank you everyone for joining me, and have a wonderful day, wonderful night, wonderful sleep. Bye bye.